pioneering, developing, and manufacturing therapies and vaccines in record time. Numbers like nobody's seen before. No medical breakthrough of this scope and magnitude has ever been achieved this rapidly, this quickly, and we're very proud of it, and had tremendous help from the military, generals, admirals, and many of the great people at the White House. Operation Warp Speed is unequaled and unrivaled anywhere in the world, and leaders of other countries have called me to congratulate us on what we've been able to do, and we've helped many countries with their ventilators and all of the problems they were having, and I'd like to congratulate everyone involved in this effort.
Hey, what up, hello? How's everyone doing? Alex Kapitko here, Tonic Accord Podcast. It is cold as hell here in Northern California, in the Lake Tahoe area. We are getting snow, the roads are getting slick, and I'm bunkered in for the night. I just got done watching Trump's interesting press conference, and my first takeaway is that I do like his new hair color. It's a little more natural, and he's a little bit calmer. And so, to be honest, I kind of wish we saw this Trump before the election. But that being said, so I decided to start my reaction from Trump's press conference with the video from the first minute, because I think it's just a perfect example of what is happening in the White House right now. You could just kind of feel that there's a low morale. And so first off, this was a press conference that came today, and I think a lot of people were thinking that Trump was either going to, maybe go off the rails, go crazy about the election. Maybe he'd double down on fraud. Or maybe he'd concede. I know a lot of people were hoping that was the case, but I didn't think that's going to happen. Let's be honest, that's not going to happen for a while. But it was an interesting press conference, to say the least. So I feel like this press conference was pretty fairly low-energy Trump. It's funny because he always used to call Jeb Bush low-energy Jeb and stuff, but Trump was really the kind of milquetoast low-energy one in here. But again, it was inaccurate, and there were a lot of falsehoods being portrayed in this press conference. And so again, this terrifies me. Basically, the press conference was all rosy about how the administration's done so well against COVID. And first off, our country just saw 150,000 new cases of COVID yesterday, and it's clear that things are only getting worse. Some of the graphs that I've seen, it almost looks parabolic in the growth right now. So that is not a positive sign. And also, Trump's been non-existent. Ever since the election, he's kind of locked himself in his room, and he's not been a leader. And I'm worried, well, I'm not really worried, but for him, he should worry that this is only going to make his legacy worse. And so, of course, in a Trumpian fashion, he took credit for the virus, dealing well with it. He took credit for the vaccine, which if you guys, I'm sure most people know that on last Monday, it came out that Pfizer is developing a vaccine that so far has about a 90% effective rate in fighting COVID, so that's positive. Of course, Trump took, all the credit for that, and he took credit for having sufficient ventilators. And the problem here is that ventilators have kind of been proven to not be the most important. And also his administration's been non-existent in COVID, messaging. It doesn't really matter what you do behind the scenes when the president comes out and talks about maybe you don't need a mask and the virus is a hoax. It's really bad. It's really bad for your messaging campaign. And then, of course, him and his followers have attacked Fauci to the point where he actually needs security for not just himself, but his kids. So, and also, I should mention this too. Mark Meadows, who said, well, we've given up on the virus. We're just going to let it do its thing. He tested positive this week, and Ben Carson tested positive this week. So clearly, I don't see a rosy image coming out of the White House, but that's a whole other thing. But this press conference was also interesting because Trump said that world leaders were congratulating him on their great response and the great help he's done. Maybe they have behind the scenes, but I think that there's a lot of falsehoods here. Because most countries have put travel bans on the United States, and what that tells me is that they don't think we're doing a good job. So I kind of find it hard to believe that these countries are putting travel bans on us, but at the same time thinking we did a good job. Maybe that's just me. Also, Biden is the president-elect, and a lot of countries have congratulated him on a victory, even though Mike Pompeo has reportedly been blocking communications between the transition team and world leaders. And so it is wild to me that, again, during probably the worst part of the pandemic so far, and during post-election division, Trump is still trying to sugarcoat COVID. It's like he thinks he has one more Hail Mary left in order to save his presidency or something. It's too late, man. That's all I can say. So I'm going to move on to the point where Trump discusses his new vaccine, or not his new vaccine, sorry, the new vaccine. and the false claim that it was his prerogative to get this done. So let's take a look.
That's possible. In July, my administration reached an agreement with Pfizer to provide $1.95 billion to support the mass manufacturing and distribution of 100 million doses, with the option to purchase a total of 600 million doses shortly thereafter. Our investment will make it possible for the vaccine to be provided by Pfizer free of charge. Pfizer said it wasn't part of Warp Speed, but that turned out to be an unfortunate misrepresentation. They are part. That's why we gave them the $1.95 billion. And it was an unfortunate mistake that they made when they said that. We will work to secure an emergency use authorization, which should be coming down extremely soon. And my administration will then coordinate the distribution of the vaccine, and it will be approved. I think, again, it will be approved very, very quickly, we hope. The average development timeline for a vaccine, including clinical tests and manufacturing, can take 8 to 12 years. Through Operation Warp Speed, we're doing it in less than 1 year. If you had a different administration with different people, what we've done would have taken, in my opinion, 3, 4, 5 years, and it would have been in the FDA.
But there's a lot to unpack here in this press conference, even in just this little part I've shown you guys now. It's truly a mixture of just petty lashing out at New York political enemies, Pfizer, other countries, and then he also brings in some optimism. To me, this feels like Trump's final stand as a snake oil salesman. And it makes sense. He's lost the election, and he basically knows that it's only a matter of time before he's out of there. So I guess that's what you do. You try to sell that snake oil while you can. But yeah, I'm going to try to stray away from talking about Trump's actual rhetoric. I want to more focus on the meat of this, which is the question that I think everyone's asking. Was the administration involved in this Pfizer vaccine that could be up to 90% effective against COVID-19? Because on Monday, Vice President Pence said that this only was possible thanks to the public-private partnership that was forged during Trump's years. And to be completely honest, there's probably some truth there. Because you do need a public-private, relationship just to get these type of things done. But unfortunately, I don't really think this brings all of the reason and facts to the case. Because from what I've gathered, Trump has done a good job of getting companies active in the fight for a vaccine, and I'll applaud him for that. And actually, his kind of tough, strongman, businessman, cutthroat image actually could maybe help with getting companies to use more of their own capital to do this. But from what I'm seeing, his administration just gave Pfizer $1.95 billion in incentives to do this. They didn't actually give Pfizer the money from the reports I'm seeing. They just told them that once you deliver this to people, you will get this. It's almost like a legal bribe. That's kind of what I'm seeing. And so this is something that doesn't really surprise me that much, especially about the Trump administration in general. But the Times said that in July, Pfizer gave a $1.95 billion deal with the government's Operation Warp Speed. But here's the caveat. The arrangement was an advance purchase agreement, meaning that the company wouldn't get paid until they delivered the vaccines. And honestly, I think in a nutshell, that's what this Operation Warp Speed is. It's just like dangling a carrot out in front of these companies and telling them, hey, if you can get a good vaccine, you're going to reap the rewards of this. And I mean, honestly, it kind of works, especially in a time when we need a vaccine. And I guess it did work. And I'll actually give the Trump administration props on that, because we are the country who did, actually the Pfizer vaccine did come from German research, so it's more international than that, but the U.S. is the one who seems to have the first doses, and we're going to be pushing it out to our population first. So I give Trump credit for that, but he did not create this vaccine. He was not influential in creating this vaccine, and that's what we need to understand here. He just feels like a guy who's trying to give his last pitch before he's out of office. Like, all the stuff he was talking about just isn't real. He was talking about how the stock market's doing great now. Yes, it's doing great now because after Biden was declared the president-elect, the world realized it was a less volatile market and it was a more stable market. So yeah, of course it went off. But Trump thinks it's because of his presidency. Honestly, I feel like that guy Rip Van Winkle, if anyone's ever read that classic story. I feel like I woke up after 100 years and That's probably the only way I'd believe this press conference is if I was sleeping for the last century and woke up and heard Trump saying all this. I'd be like, let's elect him for the next decade. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. And so kind of going off of this Rip Van Winkle metaphor for a little bit longer, I guess my 100-year slumber and then waking up to Trump's rosy message has been ruined. Because guess who came up next in this press conference? Dr. Monsef Slaoui. He's a molecular biologist and a person who has worked on a lot of vaccine research. And he was appointed by the Trump administration as part of this Operation Warp Speed. And honestly, he's very qualified, and I like to see him wearing a mask. That's sending a strong message when he was the only person wearing a mask there. Obviously, in front of the cameras. There were more people in the crowd wearing masks, but the only one speaking. And that sends a message. And he did articulate many of the claims better, as you're going to see in a moment. But I do feel like he was almost fact-checking Trump or like watering down Trump's happiness. And he kind of played damage control. So let's take a look and see what happens.
It is important to note that this progress has been achieved without any political interference. I said it many times. And at every step has been and is being judged by independent expert bodies, whether it's when the FDA grants the green light to go into clinical trials, or whether when the data safety monitoring boards review the safety of the studies on an ongoing basis and sometimes put them on hold, as I'm sure you have witnessed with the AstraZeneca vaccine, for instance. On that basis, I personally feel very comfortable to say that the vaccines and the therapeutics that we have helped develop and accelerate will be judged independently, and if approved, should be used by all in the population. Because I believe vaccination is likely to be the cornerstone among all the other measures that we have to take to help us really control this pandemic.
So, let's be honest here. I did like this guy. He's qualified, he's smart, and he wore a mask. That's a good check for COVID. During a pandemic, I mean. And so I like how he did clarify things. But I do think that that's bad at the end, because he had to clarify that the vaccine wasn't politicized, and it was reviewed by independent experts. He actually had to go out and say, the things we're doing now and the research towards the vaccine are not politicized. To me, that screams that he's saying Trump didn't force this vaccine through. Trump didn't force this narrative. It's actually a good vaccine. And that's promising on one side. But it's also alarming to me that a guy has to clarify that politics weren't involved in molecular biology. And to me, that's like if I got a drink at a bar and the bartender tells me, don't worry, I didn't put roofies in your drink. It's like, okay, man, I didn't need to know that, because the fact you're clarifying that is kind of alarming. To me, it just shows that Trump has eroded our trust in government even more so. I really do wonder how many people would take this vaccine, because you have kind of the conspiracy-minded people who are anti-vaxxers, and then you have a lot of liberals who are kind of like, is the administration part of this? I don't know. It's going to be tough. Now, things did get strange for me towards the middle of the conference. I don't know if you guys started asking yourselves this, but I was like, where is Dr. Fauci? Where is Anthony Fauci? This was a coronavirus discussion. I was at least expecting to get a shot of him, or at least a couple words from him. It's just weird because this was kind of a new cast of characters. It kind of felt like Trump's post-election special, Cleaning House, or the slow-moving coup, No More Critics. I don't know. Maybe I'm just speculating here, but who knows. I'm not going to play any videos of this, but it next went to General Perna, who is a 4-star general and served in Iraq, so he's qualified to be a general. And he was appointed to help with Operation Warp Speed. Of course, he had no mask at a briefing, just like the next guy, who is my least favorite health expert, Alex Azar. He wasn't masked. He kind of just sycophantically talked about Trump. Let's watch a brief little clip. So, don't get me wrong here. And I don't really feel the need to articulate it, but I'll at least say that two things can be true here. This German-originated vaccine was bolstered by U.S. help, and it probably was the pressure from the Trump administration to really get them moving forward. But also, Trump hasn't done a good job with COVID. A vaccine is good, but Trump's messaging and conspiracies on COVID that have now inflamed his base and divided our country over a pandemic, it's really hurt us. It's hurt our economy. It's hurt our people. And it's hurt, quite frankly, our life-death ratios here. So, and finally, Pence came in. And like always, his audience wasn't the American people, but Trump. Let's take a quick look.
I was grateful to just have a few minutes today to commend the team of Operation Warp Speed. It was your vision that we could harness the ingenuity and the creativity of America's greatest pharmaceutical and research companies to speed in record time a vaccine that would save American lives. You told...
Honestly, the main thing that surprises me about this video is that I didn't know the COVID task force still existed. I don't think many Americans knew it existed because the American people, since if my memory is correct, I think it was late September, early October, the last time that the COVID task force actually spoke to the American people. What's the point of comforting the nation? We don't want people to feel good and do the right thing. So Pence is remarkable to me. He's really remarkable to me because he disappears, never speaks up when he needs to, and then he just appears to kiss the president's ass. It's really too bad. I just think it would make a lot more sense if this task force hadn't, pretty much kicked out Fauci and hadn't discredited the facts and, put in a radiologist as their epidemiologist. I don't know about you guys, but radiology doesn't mean epidemiology. I'm going to leave this here, but I have one last clip, and I think it actually summarizes this press conference pretty well. It's a man yelling at Trump about when he will admit he lost the election. Listen carefully. I'll play it twice. It's, a guy just saying, hey, man, when are you going to admit that you lost? So you guys take care. Probably don't go to bars. Be safe. Be smart. Peace.